Hello and welcome to Metis Posh Radio, India's first radio for posh awareness, where conversations go beyond compliance and into building truly safe, respectful, and inclusive workspaces. This is your host Jaya, and in each episode, we bring voices that really challenge the perspectives, deepen our understanding, and inspire action around prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. So today, I am really looking forward to a very thoughtful conversation with someone who brings absolute depth and clarity to this space, Anagha Sarpoda. Anagha, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
What drew you to work in this space of sexual harassment and gender justice?
My work started on violence against women even while I was a student. So while I was studying at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, we have something called the field work, which we do in both the years of the MA degree program. And second year, I started working with the special cell for women, which is a field action project of TISS. And these are special cells in police stations which do direct work with women affected by violence. So that is how my work started in the second year, and then it continued. I graduated in 1999, and then my work with the special cell continued. And of course, after working on domestic violence, social and legal issue, I moved on to work on sexual harassment at workplace. When I started working on sexual harassment at workplace, I looked at it as a form of violence against women, more so because there was no law in 2005. And many organizations were not following the Vishaka guidelines. So the way I looked at it was that this is a form of violence that women face at workplace, and there is no recourse. So that is how it all started, because my core interest is to work on violence against women.
When we talk about POSH today, do you think organizations are truly moving beyond policy into practice, or are we still navigating that gap? What do you think?
I think organizations are still largely caught up with compliance and ticking the boxes. So, and the reason why I'm saying this is whenever, we talk about, something doing a little more than probably what the act says, or, there are some gray areas in the act which need interpretation. So when we interpret it in a way which requires the organization to maybe walk a little further, I'm immediately asked that, where is it written in the act that you need to do training for, 6 hours or for one day? Where is it written in the act that the employee awareness has to continue for the entire year? So this in itself shows that organizations want to only comply and not really, take a step forward. They just want to tick the box.
Looking back, what has actually surprised or stayed with you the most in your such a long journey that you've had?
I mean, in terms of understanding, what I gather now after 25 years of work on 25 years of paralegal work is that maybe the laws do not have answer for everything.
That's true.
It is all about the mindset. Because it is the human beings who implement the act. It could be any act. It could be the workplace sexual harassment law. It could be the act for child sexual abuse or domestic violence, any act. But it is the mindset which matters of the people who are involved, especially people who are responsible for uh, implementing or operationalizing that particular law. So, law in itself is inadequate. I think it is all to do with the person's mindset, because if the person is geared towards making that piece of legislation work, then I think they can actually interpret that legislation in a way which benefits that particular group. So it's all about the mindset of the people.
That's true. That's so true. Now, in your experience, what are some of the myths that you have seen in the realm of posh?
Yeah, so one of the biggest myths that is I have seen is that it is being misused rampantly. While I do not deny the possibility of misuse, but at the same time, I can say that there is no rampant misuse. Because in a country like India, where uh, people do not even prefer to utter the word sex, misusing a law on sexual harassment is not that easy. In 20 years of my work, I must have seen maybe one or two false cases, not more than that.
Okay.
So I think it is a myth where people believe that it is being rampantly misused.
Okay.
The other myth that I see is that if you give information, then there will be lot of cases. That if creating awareness will bring in lot of cases. I don't think that that happens because when the information is given, uh, it results in also preventing. It's not just about reporting. So I think this is a big myth that, if we constant, if we are like, I have heard people saying don't overdo awareness.
Correct.
If you're overdoing it, then it may backfire. And
Correct.
in what way? That you will have many cases. I don't think that's
Yeah. So in fact, when I was working with couple of customers, they were saying that no, we don't want to put up posters in conspicuous places. We'll put it only in notice board. We don't want to overdo. We don't want employees to like. There is absolutely nothing now, so we should not be putting unnecessarily things into their mind. So these are all common things that we have seen with employers also.
I just underwent a small surgery and I was admitted to a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not seen anything, no posters, nothing. It's one of the biggest hospitals in Mumbai, a super specialty hospital. Of course, I will not name it, but it's a super specialty hospital. But I didn't see anything. I just saw some small poster somewhere, where there is a daycare ward, where people get admitted for few hours. But the main wards where I was admitted for about 8 to 9 days, uh, nothing. There are no posters.
In your experience, what are those subtle behaviors that people often don't recognize as harassment or they just consider it to be trivial, Anaga?
One is, of course, staring, which is very common in India, because it's like, how do you know he's staring at you? We may be just us giving blank stares, and you're imagining. So that is one. The other is, there are body shaming. It's also seen as harmless, like especially fat shaming and all. Like people will say, we are just telling this to you so that, in the interest of your health and all that. Body shaming is also not, I mean, though it may be covered by the act, the general public doesn't see it as sexual harassment. Even spreading, these linking people together is seen as some gossip. It's not seen as defamation or maligning somebody's character. It's seen more as a as a fun activity, as a gossip. So I think these are some of the, or commenting on clothes, or asking personal questions. I think that I think tops the list. Questions like, are you married? Why are you not married? When are you planning to get married? And uh, when are you planning to maybe have a child or start a family? Why haven't you still done it? Why I know How are you managing if your husband, if you're in a long distance relationship or a long distance marriage, how are you managing? All of this is not seen is still not seen as sexual harassment.
So you work for both corporates as well as in the unorganized sectors also, Anaga. Do you also get to work with?
So I'm heading the local committee for Mumbai City district. So Mumbai has two districts, Mumbai City and Mumbai suburbs.
Mhm.
I'm heading the local committee for Mumbai City.
Hmm.
And we have tried our best to create awareness in the unorganized sector.
Mhm.
But we have not really succeeded, especially with domestic workers, because the act says that the domestic workers can report their cases to the local committee. We haven't really received. We've tried. We are now trying to create awareness in workplaces which have less than 10 employees,
Mhm.
but they may not be typically the unorganized sector. They could be small offices.
Hmm. Like
So
your
we are
co-working
trying to,
spaces, you're saying.
yeah,
Okay. Hmm.
co-working spaces, or a small, say a small shop where you have just 4 people, or a small office, a small enterprise
Hmm.
where you have just 5 people, 6 people.
Hmm.
So it is not the typical unorganized sector the way it is envisaged generally. But as per law, it is unorganized sector because it has less than 10 employees.
Correct. So in fact, my experience was that so when we started off as a company, right, Anaga, we also wanted to do something pro bono for community, right? So we approached couple of district collectors and said that we are ready to do like, awareness sessions and all of that. And he looked at us with a lot of doubt, actually. He was like, why are you coming? Why are you coming to us? Why are you reaching out to us? Did you get some information that we are not doing? He started looking at it more like, that somebody has complained, so she's reaching out. We were telling that it's just a pro bono work that we want to do. We are not charging, but we want to do it as a goodwill. But even that was looked at with a lot of doubts, and we did not even get a permission for that. Right. So how do you manage these awareness sessions? I mean, are you using the local Mahila Sanghas or women organizations, etc., to also kind of reach out to public?
So we are doing it as local committee.
Okay.
So we are appointed by the district collector, and we are doing it. We plan to do these sessions through the district women and child office.
Okay.
So in Maharashtra,
Hmm.
the district women and child office. So every district has a women and child office.
Mhm.
Department of Women and Child Development,
Hmm.
which is DWCD,
Hmm.
has an office
Hmm.
in every district, and they actually are a bridge between the local committee and the district collector.
Hmm.
So it is through them we are doing it. So it's like as good as the government doing it themselves.
Correct. Okay.
We will just be as a resource persons. It will be organized by the government.
Since you're also taking care of Maharashtra's, part of local committees in Maharashtra, any thoughts on the TCS case that is happening? I heard that NCW has taken up a suo motu cognizance and they have done the investigation, etc. But any thoughts on what is happening in Maharashtra on that particular case?
I think the case is about sexual harassment because I've been reading accounts of the complainants.
Mhm.
So the case is definitely of sexual harassment, but there is a probability that it is being manipulated in a different direction. It's just a probability. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
But the core issue in that case is sexual harassment, and I think that needs attention. Although I understand that it has also gone under the ambit of the criminal law.
Hmm.
And they do have an internal committee which is conducting inquiry. So I think the internal committees need to be strengthened.
Hmm.
See, when such cases come to light, one often thinks whether internal committees are paying attention to prevention. Because that 2016 amendment which happened, where the nomenclature was changed from ICC to IC, the word complaints was dropped. So the implication of the word complaints being dropped means that the committee is responsible for prevention and not just redressal,
True.
which is usually the impression that committees have. So are they really doing prevention? And what does prevention mean? Is prevention just telling people that don't indulge in sexual harassment, or the do's and don'ts, or is prevention also encouraging women to report? See, because this particular case which you just spoke about or you referred to, there we see that the women were discouraged from reporting, and their complaints were not taken formally for inquiry. So that itself shows that reporting is not welcome. So I think the IC needs to pay attention to prevention and not just redressal. And as I said, prevention also entails giving that comfort to women that, we are fine if you report, we have no problem.
Very rightly said in terms of prevention, Anaga, what you said. So, if prevention and prohibition was the reason why an internal complaints committee was changed to an internal committee, right? I still see in lot of places the reports, I mean, whether it's a high court judgment or a Supreme Court judgment, still using this ICC still, right? So, that nomenclature has not changed at all.
See, it's not just about the ICC. Courts will also, most of the times, do not use the word respondent. They still use the words like delinquent and perpetrator and offender, and
Right.
prosecutrix. So courts are definitely not a role model.
When we as Metis consciously we tell people, when we look at their policies, everything, we ask them to change this ICC or internal complaints committee to internal committee. And one common question they have is, everywhere in the government documents we still see IC, any notifications which comes out, Anaga, like whether from a any ministry or
There is a 2016 notification from the government of India.
so what I'm saying is the local notifications which comes from district offices also still mention it as ICC only.
That is because they are not updated, and also they may not be knowing the implication of that change in nomenclature. Once
Correct.
they know what it means, that there is a change in interpretation, with the word get complaints getting dropped. I think then people will get the seriousness of that change in nomenclature.
That's true. And another question I had in my mind, I thought I should ask you is, do you see any patterns in complaints that organizations usually tend to overlook? I'm saying from the organization's perspective, do you see patterns there where behaviors are still acceptable, they're not considered to be sexual harassment or something they tend to overlook and say that, "Arey, itna hi to hai."
Honestly, I've not really seen that happen, at least with the organizations that I work. Uh, but it may so happen that, see, this also manifests when people emphasize on intention. While the complaint may be entertained, but there may be some kind of justification by saying that, does he behave like this with everybody? Or, what was his intention? So, this whole thing of, whether he intended, see, just now, before I logged into this discussion, there is a judgment of the Punjab and Haryana High Court where the court has said that at the workplace, if somebody uses the F word, or something F, whatever off, uh, if if it is not used with some sexual intent, then it is not sexual harassment. So again, the court is laying a lot of emphasis on the intention.
Yeah, especially that word can be used for happiness, for sadness, for anger, for like every other thing. And that has become such a common, which was once a forbidden word in organizations. Now Gen Zs use it like,
Yeah.
left, right, and center in the workplaces, right?
But then, focusing on intent may be dangerous
Hmm.
because the word in itself is sexually colored.
Correct, absolutely. Okay, one is you said prevention is something that the internal committee should focus, and right now it's more on compliance. Is there anything that you see in terms of improvement areas in the internal committees, the way they function in organizations? And
Yeah, of course. I think internal committees need to, constantly update themselves. most of the internal committees are not updated. That and I would not hold them responsible, because this is additional work for them. So they are doing their regular work, and this is an added kind of a task to
Correct.
their list of jobs or whatever. But having said this, once you are appointed as a committee member, you need to update yourself constantly, not just on the court judgments, but you also need to update yourself on the interpretation of the act.
Correct.
Because, see, this law is all about interpretation.
That's true.
And that too, in the interest of in the interest of the group for which it has been enacted, which is women.
That's true.
So I think that update needs to happen constantly, that brainstorming needs to happen constantly. What is the spirit of the law? So I think internal committees are just doing their jobs mechanically, without actually, getting constantly updated, and the capacity needs to be built.
I think it's also intent of the employer, right? Employer should see value.
Absolutely. The whole thing finally comes down to gender budgeting. Okay. What is the resource allocation that the employer does for this issue? Whenever an employer makes a choice that they are going to have online modules which are cheaper than a facilitator driven session, whenever the employer makes a choice that they are going to appoint
Correct.
some person as an external member who has no experience, and who has recently started doing this work and has no adequate exposure, vis-a-vis somebody who is working for many years, just because the fresher is charging less. I think there in itself the employer is making a statement that they don't want to prioritize this issue. And this is also happening because the law is for women. And why should we give so much money for a law which is for women, and there is a possibility of misuse? uh, you know so I think these are the thoughts at the back of their mind when they decide to not give resources or allocate
Yeah, true.
resources.
And in fact, while I was dealing with one of the cases, our presiding officer's manager has put a condition to her saying that I will give you a choice whether you want to be in the committee and spend time or you want to be there in the project. And just look at the way they're even looking at this issue, right? So immediately the presiding officer, all of a sudden, she just came and said, I want to, recuse myself. I don't want to be a part of this. And in the mid of an inquiry. And we had to fight it out with the employer to say that, please set this right. A manager cannot be making putting our presiding officers in pressure and, things like that. So a lot of these things happen where I think unless the employer is super serious and is spreading down that message down and telling all the managers that this should be topmost priority of yours, etc. And in our awareness sessions also doing separately for managers, separately for employees, and telling the manager specifically that, as a first point of contact, when you get to know what are the things you must be doing and how you should support for a safe work environment, I think that will make a little bit of a difference. But I see that it's the same training given to everybody, with just the basic compliance checklist. So these are problems that of course we have also seen. The next thing that I also wanted to ask you, Anaga, is um, what does a trauma informed approach mean in a posh inquiry? I've had a personal experience, so I thought I will just share, ask you, but you can let me know what exactly do you think a trauma informed approach in a posh inquiry would mean?
So I think first, the IC needs to understand the meaning of trauma, because a lot of people continue to think that trauma means the incident. The incident of sexual harassment is a trauma, which is not true. Trauma is the impact, is the scar which is there on the person's mind, which remains because of the incident. So, in order to have a trauma informed approach, I think a lot needs to go in identifying the impact, and uh, what is the impact, what is the intensity of the impact, and what kind of fears are, what kind of fears are there because of that impact. So the impact may be such that the complainant thinking that I'm going to lose the job, or this is going to destroy my family, or my career is going to go haywire. So understanding the fears is also a part of trauma informed approach. One of the other things is also when the IC, there are these interim recommendations which are IC has to do in terms of transfer, in terms of recommending leave. I think they need to be also done in discussion with the complainant,
Hmm.
because many times ICs recommend uh, on their own that
Correct.
transfer this person, transfer that person, or we are recommending leave, even compensation for that matter, which is part of the penalty. And then people tell me that the complainant is refusing to accept the compensation. Uh, Obviously, because in India there is negative value attached to money, and the complainant says that I did not complain for money. I complained for justice, or I complained because I wanted to tell everyone that I'm not telling lies. So this in itself is traumatizing when the IC kind of, decides things on their own without, having a democratic process of discussion with the complainant. Do you really want to be transferred? Or, do you really want to go on leave? Because many complainants perceive being sent on leave as loss of job. So trauma informed approach is basically, that is one. And also a big part of trauma informed approach is also mental health. So what is happening to the mental health of the complainant and the respondent? Uh, I firmly believe that every organization should have either they should have a counselor, a tie up with a counselor, or they should kind of pay for counseling of the complainant and the respondent, not just complainant, even the respondent.
Hmm.
So
That is true.
a focus on mental health is also a part of trauma informed approach. Of course, safety of the complainant. There are complainants who say that I don't want to be in a particular place, and this particular building or this particular area, etc. So, or it's a combined kind of a thing where basically trauma informed approach is also survivor centered approach, where you focus on the survivor and the survivor's fears, concerns, needs, all of that.
Of course, the act says that if there is a mental or a physical disability, who can complain, on behalf of a complainant with her consent. But it does not talk about, let's say, in an inquiry, if a complainant is extremely in a traumatic situation and she's not able to recall the incidents again and again and things like that, she would like to have a support of a family member. So the act does not specifically say regarding having a family member during the inquiry, but it only talks about. So have you had experiences where family members have participated?
Yeah. So I think, see, this is just one example of where the act is silent. So I had experiences, and we allow family members, friends as observers
Hmm.
in inquiries.
Okay.
Of course, as far as drafting the complaint is concerned, this difficulty to remember and write the complaint in a coherent manner is basically trauma response.
Hmm.
So the impact which the incident has created on the mind of the complainant is not allowing the complainant to write the complaint in a coherent manner, and in a sequential and a chronological manner. So there, I think IC can help, because the law says, the act says that IC needs to render assistance,
Hmm.
etc.
Correct.
But along with the IC, yes, if somebody can just be present
Hmm.
with the complainant,
Hmm.
not actively participating in the process, but just be there.
Correct.
Even in the inquiry, we allow observers. But I have, again, I would say that the policy, the anti-sexual harassment policy or the POSH policy of the organization needs to, talk about all these gray areas in the act
Hmm.
where the act is silent,
Hmm.
like this one, or even suspension of the respondent.
Correct.
The act does not talk about suspension,
Hmm.
and many times committees face this issue that where is it written in the act that the committee has power to suspend the respondent. Then you have to fall back on this whole thing. There are judgments in other inquiries that if the respondent is obstructing the inquiry, he or she can be suspended and all that. But so those are interpretations. But the act is silent. So I think the most of the policies of the organizations that I see are copy paste of the act.
Correct. Hmm.
That doesn't help. You have an act. Why are you copy pasting it? What you need to do is your policy needs to fill the gaps where the act is silent or the act is gray.
So
You
which are
need
the
to
other gray areas that you see, Anaga, apart
uh,
from this?
uh, other gray areas. See, a simple thing like, a gender neutral policy or a gender agnostic policy. When people say that our policy is gender neutral, fine. You say our policy is gender neutral, but are you specifying that the reliefs and privileges which are available to women under the workplace sexual harassment law, are they going to be extended to men? You know, it's not just enough to say that the policy is gender neutral. Women have so many reliefs. And women can drag the employer to the court for not giving them those reliefs,
Uh-huh.
like interim leave or transfer, whatever it may be, appraisal, stopping the respondent from doing the appraisal. Are you going to extend these reliefs to men and transgender persons and queer persons? So, starting from there, the policy needs to, this is one of the gray areas because people just say we have a gender agnostic neutral policy and leave it at that. But I think they need to very specifically say, okay, technically, IC cannot conduct inquiries in complaints registered by men. Then, is the IC still going to do it as a panel? Or are you going to have a special panel for men and, all persons who do not fall under the purview of the Act? Um, what about things like penalties? See, the Act has certain penalties listed. The organizations have different set of penalties. So the policy needs to say, which set of penalties are going to be followed, which are given in the act or which the organization has.
So, any case that has caused some kind of fear in you, Anaga, in your experience, something which you have
No.
got really scared? Nothing?
Never.
Has there been anything where there is fear of how this is going to pan out? What's going to any fear which has given you sleepless nights? Any case that's given you
No.
nothing? Okay.
In fact, I would want Sahisa cases to go to the court so that the court actually, interprets because I think there is a lot to interpret.
Mhm.
So honestly, I've never been scared.
Okay, that's nice.
Never.
When I started, being an external member, initial days I had a lot of fears, Anaga, really. Because you want to do right, no? You want to give justice. So that fear of whether I'm doing the right thing, whether this is going to lead to justice, that was a lot. Of course, now after 13, 14 years of being in the realm of POSH, you learn how to deal with it. But yeah, we see IC members getting into a panic more than the complainant. The IC members get into a panic mode.
Yeah.
So they also have to be constantly counseled by the external member to stay kind of very
But
balanced.
I also have a feeling that in the long run, if this act has to succeed, this this over dependence on the external member also has to reduce
That's true.
because ICs need to mature. ICs need to gear. gear themselves to different kinds of situations. See, because today you and I are there. After 10 years, you and I may not be there. We may decide to retire or whatever. And, I mean, there will be a completely different set of people coming in. And, so ICs are going to be there. So ICs need to also, do some homework and some preparation themselves and not completely rely on the external member. Like, you only decide and you only tell us and, all that.
Mm.
That is not going to help ICs in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, that over dependence on the external member to actually
Absolutely.
decide on a case is not right. I think as external members also, we should enable them to kind of come together, think, discuss. They shouldn't think that it's an external's job because they have been hired.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
And with any new forms of harassments that you see are emerging, Anaga? Of course, one is the online space, which is getting a little murkier with deepfake and all of that. Anything else that you're observing which is very alarming in this space?
See, it is not new,
Hmm.
but it is an area which I think India needs to pay attention is the relationship part.
Hmm.
See, in the West, Europe, US, organizations have clear policies around relationships. Where they say, whatever it may be, they say that, we are prohibiting romantic and sexual relationships between senior, juniors, or colleagues. So these non fraternization policies, whatever relationship policy, dating policy, whatever we may call it, but they are spelled out. In India, they are not spelled out. And whenever I talk about it, I am told that let us not do moral policing. So this is not moral policing. See, this is in fact, you're recognizing that, when a person at a senior position is in a relationship with a person at a junior position, consent is not going to play any role. The consent is going to be under pressure. So you need to recognize all these, nuances. I think this is not new, but this is an unattended area in India. And that is why, you have these people asking questions like, what about promise of marriage? Promise of marriage is not sexual harassment.
That's true.
It is cheating.
Yeah, that's
But you still have complaints coming where women say that I was sexually exploited and then the person refused to marry me. All of this is happening because we don't have relationship policies, which are contextual.
Yeah. So, Anaga, like, see, there could be some cases where a person is trying to target the innocent young women, luring them into a relationship, and then, citing some reason, moving on to another woman. And there has been consent from women thinking that it's a real love or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then they move on from one woman to one woman. And then we see that all of them coming and filing complaint of sexual harassment. But apparently, if you see, they've got manipulated. More than a
Yeah.
sexual harassment, they've got
It's
manipulated,
cheating.
they've given
It's
consent.
cheating, manipulation. It's
Yeah,
not
so
sexual harassment.
that still would not be a sexual harassment,
No.
but it could be a cheating case,
It
which
could be, yes, it could be. And it also, see, that is the reason I said that the relationship policy needs to be there because the organization probably needs to say that we don't encourage. See, but there are companies who have told me that we encourage relationships at work because people get married, they have a feeling of belonging. I find this view slightly problematic. I mean,
But I see a lot of relationships within companies, Anika. And see, like for example, recently one of a very senior member told me they spent 12 hours together in office. So it is bound to happen. It usually happens in the same team because they're all working together for a long period of time. They seek each other's help. They go to each other. So this is bound to happen. So we may not be in a position to put a policy, but we'll have to just let them know that, hey, something like this happens, it could come back, as complaints of sex.
yeah.
This is where even the workplaces got extended, Anaga. Like, because they become very close at office, they start going to each other's houses.
Correct.
And then they claim that there were certain things which happened in the houses, right? And then, of course, we take it up because at the end of the day, they have connection to work. Both
Yeah.
of them have to come back, work together. So,
So there could be blackmailing. There could be blackmailing which may result out of this. There could be threats, intimidation. If one wants to
right.
walk out of the relationship and the other one. So too many complexities. I mean, I'm not, again, I'm not saying that put a ban. I'm just saying that, recognize that relationships are a breeding ground for these kind of issues. And, I think a thought needs to go from the Indian corporate world uh, towards this issue of, relationships and relationships going sour, violence in the relationship after it ends, retaliation after it ends. What is the organization's policy and stand around all these issues?
That's great.
Basically.
So I also wanted to ask some things about the witness from the witness's perspective, Anaga. There are cases where witnesses come and tell us, "I'm willing to tell everything that the IC wants, but whatever I tell should not go to both of them," right? And it's not possible.
No, that's not
Okay,
possible.
because they both have a right to cross-examine the witnesses, or even right.
Yeah. And whatever is generated in an
Hmm.
inquiry between the IC complainant and respondent, it is to be exchanged between with
Hmm.
both of them. So there is nothing like confidentiality between the IC complainant and
Hmm.
respondent.
But these
IC cannot say this is confidential. We are not going to give it
but
to
these
you. No.
witnesses often come and say he's my immediate reporting manager. We don't know if it's going to lead to termination or is going to stay back. If he stays back, then we are going to face the repercussions. So I don't want what I say to go to him or her, whatever.
But again, this brings us back to the policy. How strong is your anti-retaliation component in the policy? Or do you have a separate policy on anti-retaliation? Whether the organization has a policy on retaliation in sexual harassment cases, or whistleblower also sometimes. I don't know, whistleblower could be anonymous, but sexual harassment, retaliation, the policy has to be strong, because for people to believe that there will be no retaliation. Also, who will protect the witness from retaliation is IC. So the IC also needs to be strong and should be able to give that assurance. I think it all finally comes to it is an employer driven legislation, and the employer needs to put all these safeguards in place pertaining to retaliation, especially.
If there is one thing that you would want to change in the realm of Posh, as far as organizations are concerned, Anaga, what would that be?
Of course, as I said, the allocation of resources. I would
Okay.
really want organizations to, invest adequately in, prevention and not cut costs, because this is seen as a cost cutting domain. I think that is something I would not want to happen. You know, pay the, when you're choosing an external member, choose as per their experience, expertise, and not what the person is charging. And like you rightly said, uh, not the procurement people coming into it, but it should be done by the HR directly, or by somebody in the management who understands
Correct.
the importance of an external member,
That's true.
and not treated as a vendor.
Correct. They look at it more like a vendor relationship. That is a problem with this entire thing. So, Anaga, do you see you have worked for so long? Are you seeing things improving in workplaces because of this act?
Yeah, because now things are formal. There were times when things were not formal. Yeah, the enactment and the enforcement of the act has definitely improved, but I think we have a long way to go.
At least I'm hopeful that we have a good start. At least we have started it. Thank you so much, Anaga, for sharing such amazing and valuable insights today. Conversations like these remind us that creating a safe workplace is not just about policies, but it's about those everyday actions, awareness, accountability, etc. So thank you so much, Anaga, again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So to everyone listening, let's take this forward, not just as a discussion, but as a commitment. This is Jaya signing off from Posh Radio. Safe workplace is everybody's responsibility. Thank you.